Somewhere in the Arabian Sea, 2 in the morning. A $2.5 billion destroyer swings its bow away from the Iranian coastline and begins heading south. Not because it took damage, not because the crew needs rest, because 12 hours ago this ship fired its last Tomahawk cruise missile, cell number 96, into an IRGC command node buried inside the Zagros Mountains. The missile worked. The target is rubble. The ship is intact. The crew is ready, but the ship is leaving. 96 vertical launch cells, every one of them empty. 3,500 pounds per missile, 20 feet 6 inches long, $2 million each. And this ship has no way to put a single new one back inside those cells. Not out here. Not on the open ocean. The only place this destroyer can reload is a concrete pier with a shore-based crane, and the nearest one is over 2,000 nautical miles south at Diego Garcia. 1 week to get there. 3 to 5 days under the crane. 1 week to get back. 3 weeks out of the fight. A ship built to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum, carrying the most advanced combat system ever put to sea, sidelined by an empty magazine and the absence of a machine that can fill it. The machine exists. It was tested. It works. But it is still in development, proven twice at sea, not yet fielded to the fleet. It arrived one war too late. 850 Tomahawks have left American launch tubes in less than 5 weeks, more than the entire Iraq War, the highest number of cruise missiles fired in a single campaign in history. And the question no headline is asking is not how many we fired, but how we reload. If that question matters to you, subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not celebrate weapons here, we calculate whether they last. To understand why a Navy that spends more on its fleet than the next 9 nations combined cannot reload its own missiles at sea, we have to start with the physics that made it impossible. Start with a cell. The Mark 41 vertical launching system is the backbone of American surface warfare. More than 60 warships carry it. Every Arleigh Burke destroyer, every Ticonderoga cruiser. Each cell is a steel tube, roughly 25 inches square, just wide enough to accept a missile canister with inches of clearance on each side. Now think about what goes inside. A Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missile in its launch canister, 20 feet 6 inches long, 3,500 pounds. A turbofan engine, a warhead packed with several hundred pounds of high explosive, and a solid rocket booster filled with propellant. This is not a forgiving piece of cargo. This is a steel tube packed with explosive force, designed to be lowered into a steel sleeve with the precision of a surgical instrument. On a concrete pier, with a shore-based crane locked to the ground, this operation is routine. Crane lifts canister. Canister descends vertically. Guide rails align it. It slides in, done. The earth does not move. The pier does not roll. Gravity pulls straight down. Now try it at sea. A ship on the open ocean moves in 6 axes simultaneously. Pitch, the bow rises and falls. Roll, the hull tilts side to side. Heave, the entire ship lifts and drops on the swell. Yaw, sway, surge. Every second, the deck beneath your feet shifts in a direction the crane did not anticipate. And here is the physics that killed the idea. When you suspend a 3,500-pound canister from a crane cable, the canister becomes a pendulum. The ship rolls left, the cable swings right. The ship heaves upward, the canister drops. The correction lag between the ship's motion and the canister's inertia creates an uncontrolled oscillation. At sea state 3, moderate swells, nothing dramatic, the amplitude of that pendulum swing exceeds the clearance tolerance of the VLS cell. The canister impacts the cell wall at an angle. Steel meets steel. Inside that canister, rocket propellant and a warhead. One wrong impact and the crew is not reloading. The crew is evacuating. That is why the Navy stopped trying. The math does not negotiate. The early Arleigh Burke destroyers, Flight 1 and Flight 2, DDG-51 through DDG-78, carried a partial solution. 2 strike-down modules, one forward and one aft, each containing a small crane designed to lower canisters into VLS cells. Each module occupied the space of 3 missile cells, reducing the ship's total capacity from 96 to 90. But there was a second problem. The pendulum did not explain. The cranes were rated for shorter, lighter canisters, not the full-weight Tomahawk. Even on calm days, they could not reliably handle the weapon that would define 21st century naval strike. In theory, these cranes allowed at-sea reloading of smaller munitions. In practice, they were rated for calm seas only, and calm seas in the Arabian Sea or the Western Pacific is a condition that exists on a calendar, not on an ocean. After years of testing, the Navy reached a conclusion. The physics of the pendulum made at-sea VLS reloading operationally impractical, so they made a trade. Starting with Flight 2A, DDG-79 onward, the Navy removed both strike-down cranes entirely. In their place, 6 additional VLS cells. Total capacity went from 90 to 96, 6 more missiles. And in exchange, the United States Navy permanently surrendered the ability to reload its primary weapon system at sea. That trade made sense in 1999. The assumption was simple. Wars would be short, precision strikes would be surgical, and 96 missiles would be more than enough to finish the job before the ship needed to return to port. For 25 years, that bet held. Then came Epic Fury. Let us be precise about what those 96 cells delivered. 850 cruise missiles launched from American destroyers and submarines in the first 5 weeks of Operation Epic Fury. No other Navy on Earth possesses the industrial capacity, the training, or the logistics chain to deliver that volume of precision firepower across that distance. This is not a story about a weapon that failed. This is a story about a weapon that succeeded, so completely that it outran the system designed to sustain it. CENTCOM confirmed over 12,000 strike sorties against targets across the full depth of Iranian territory. Tomahawk struck IRGC command and control nodes. They destroyed ballistic missile storage facilities, the backbone of Iran's threat architecture. They hit drone production lines. They cratered military airfields and dismantled naval bases. Over 155 Iranian warships were destroyed or rendered inoperable, many at their berths, unable to sortie before the missiles arrived. The campaign's opening salvo on February 28th dismantled Iran's senior military leadership. Follow-on strikes set the nuclear program back by years. The President of the United States declared the core strategic objectives nearing completion within 5 weeks. 850 Tomahawks, $1.7 billion of precision ordnance, and every single one of them worked. But volume creates a problem that firepower alone cannot solve. Every missile that leaves a VLS cell is a cell that goes dark. And the only way to turn that cell back on, the only way to reload it, is a concrete pier with a shore crane 2,000 nautical miles from the fight. Run the arithmetic. An Arleigh Burke Flight 3 destroyer carries 96 VLS cells. At full combat tempo, launching Tomahawk weeks against time-sensitive targets while simultaneously defending the carrier strike group with SM-6 interceptors, those cells empty in days. Not weeks, days. When the last cell fires, the ship has 2 options. Stay on station with no offensive capability and diminished air defense, or leave. It leaves. And here is where the bleeding begins. Transit to the nearest port with VLS loading infrastructure. Bahrain has the equipment, but during Epic Fury, the port facilities are saturated. Every pier occupied, cranes running around the clock, ships queued in the harbor waiting their turn. If Bahrain is full, the next option is Diego Garcia, 2,500 nautical miles south. After that, Ceuta Bay in Crete, 3,400 nautical miles northwest. 1 week transit out, 3 to 5 days under the crane, 1 week transit back. That is 3 weeks, minimum, during which a $2.5 billion warship contributes nothing to the fight. Now multiply. If the fleet has 10 destroyers on station and the combat tempo burns through their magazines in 5 to 7 days, then at any given moment, a third of the force is in transit to reload. Another third is waiting at the pier. The remaining third is the only portion actually fighting. The Navy does not have a firepower problem. It has a presence problem, created by firepower's own success. This is not new. In the Red Sea in 2024, destroyers defending commercial shipping against Houthi drones and missiles burned through their SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors within weeks. With no ability to reload at sea, those ships withdrew to Mediterranean ports. Ceuta Bay, Sigonella, Rota, leaving gaps in the defensive screen that took days to fill. The Houthis noticed. They attacked during the gaps. In May, the tanker Wind took a ballistic missile that killed her propulsion. In June, the bulk carrier Tudor was hit and sank. The cargo ship Verbena was struck days later. 3 ships hit in the windows between one destroyer leaving and the next one arriving. Go further back. February 23, 1945. The ammunition ship USS Shasta pulled alongside the carrier USS Bennington in the open Pacific and transferred bombs using a cable rig, the Burton transfer method. Winches, booms, cargo nets. Crude, dangerous, effective. Sailors manually handled ordnance between two ships steaming side by side at 12 knots. It worked, because a 500-pound bomb is a steel sphere. You can roll it, cradle it, absorb impacts. It tolerates rough handling. Now compare that to what sits inside a VLS cell. A Tomahawk canister is not a steel sphere. It is a 20-foot precision instrument containing volatile propellant and a focused warhead. There is no cargo net that solves that equation. There is no Burton rig that threads a 3,500-pound needle through a 25-inch opening on a moving deck. For 80 years, the Navy has been able to transfer fuel, food, and ammunition at sea. But the one thing it cannot transfer at sea, the one piece of cargo too delicate, too dangerous, too precisely dimensioned, is the missile that defines its combat power. The Navy knew this was coming. In 2022, the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory began designing a device called TRAM, the Transferable Reload at Sea method. The concept was radical in its simplicity: eliminate the pendulum. Instead of suspending the canister from a cable, letting it swing freely as the ship rolls beneath it, TRAM clamps the canister in rigid hydraulic jaws. No cable, no free-hanging load, no pendulum. The canister is locked to a rail system bolted directly to the VLS module structure. The ship moves, the rail moves, the canister moves. Everything is one rigid body. The physics of relative motion between the canister and the cell is eliminated because they are physically connected to the same frame. The process works like this. A replenishment ship, a Lewis and Clark class dry cargo vessel like USNS Washington Chambers, pulls alongside the destroyer during a standard underway replenishment. The canister transfers across on the existing unrep cable. Once aboard the destroyer, TRAM's hydraulic arms seize the canister. The rail system moves it horizontally into position over the target cell. The mechanism rotates the canister from horizontal to vertical, 90 degrees. An integrated cable and pulley system, riding inside the rigid rail, lowers the canister into the cell. The entire sequence is controlled by hydraulic power, not gravity and momentum. No pendulum, no swing, no luck. On July 15, 2024, TRAM completed its first land-based test at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Port Hueneme, California. On October 11, 2024, it went to sea. Sailors aboard the cruiser USS Chosin, CG-65, used TRAM to load an instrumented test canister into a Mark 41 VLS cell while underway off the coast of San Diego, in Sea State 4. Not the worst the Arabian Sea delivers, but real enough to validate the engineering. The canister slid in. Secretary of the Navy Carlos Del Toro called it a game changer. In July 2025, a second at-sea test aboard the destroyer USS Farragut, DDG-99, during large-scale exercise 2025 demonstrated faster reload rates, proof that the system could scale. The Navy planned to field TRAM across the fleet by late 2026 or early 2027. Operation Epic Fury began on February 28, 2026. TRAM was not there. The machine that solves the pendulum, the machine that eliminates the 3-week bleeding loop, sat in a development pipeline while the fleet burned through 850 missiles without the ability to reload a single one at sea. Now look at the full picture, and something larger emerges, something that TRAM by itself does not solve. TRAM eliminates the pendulum. It replaces the 3-week round trip to a concrete pier with a 4-hour replenishment alongside a supply ship 30 nautical miles behind the battle line. When it fields, and it will, it transforms the logistics of naval combat. Destroyers stay on station, presence gaps close, the bleeding loop ends. But TRAM does not create missiles, it moves them. Run the numbers one more time, slowly. The United States Navy fired more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles in 5 weeks. That is the highest expenditure of a single precision weapon system in any conflict since the invention of the guided missile. More than the entire 2003 Iraq campaign. Raytheon, now RTX, currently produces Tomahawk missiles at a rate of 60 to 90 per year, a minimum sustainment rate calibrated for peacetime budgets and peacetime assumptions. 850 missiles in 5 weeks, 60 to 90 produced per year. The fleet burned through roughly 10 years of production in 35 days. The defense industrial base is responding. Raytheon signed framework agreements in February 2026 to scale production toward 1,000 missiles per year. But each Tomahawk requires more than 100 subcontractors, thousands of precision components, and a production lead time of 18 to 24 months from order to delivery. Scaling a factory is not a software update. It is metal, tooling, and human hands. Now go back to Vector 1, the pendulum, the crane, the trade that gave us 96 cells instead of 90. At the beginning of this video, the decision to remove the strike-down crane looked like the mistake that created the problem. But here, at the end, the picture shifts. Even if the Navy had kept those cranes, even if the pendulum problem had never existed, the magazines would still be empty. Because the factory cannot fill them fast enough. The constraint is not distance, it is not physics, it is time. The time it takes to forge metal, assemble guidance systems, test propulsion, and deliver a finished weapon to a ship that fires them faster than any production line on Earth can build them. TRAM solves the first equation, how to get a missile from a supply ship into a VLS cell at sea. But it does not solve the second equation, how to ensure there are enough missiles on the supply ship to begin with. Epic Fury is the first conflict since World War II in which the United States Navy consumed precision munitions faster than its industrial base could replace them. That is not a weakness. That is a new category of problem, one that any force powerful enough to fight at high intensity for sustained periods will eventually face. The physics of manufacturing do not accelerate, simply because the physics of warfare demand it. If you now see factories instead of warships when you think about naval power, subscribe to Navy Decoded and share this with someone who still thinks wars are won by the weapons that fly, not by the machines that build them. Now go back to the image we started with, a $2.5 billion destroyer turning away from the fight at 2 in the morning. 96 cells, all empty. Headed south, toward a concrete pier and a crane bolted to the ground. 3 weeks out of the war, the Navy built that ship to carry 96 missiles. It removed the cranes that could reload them and gained 6 additional cells in return. For 25 years, that arithmetic worked. 96 was enough. Then came a 5-week war that burned 850. TRAM will fix part of this equation. A hydraulic rail bolted to a VLS module, clamping a 3,500-pound canister in rigid jaws, lowering it into a cell at sea while the ocean tries to stop it. The pendulum, the physics that defeated every previous attempt, will be eliminated. Destroyers will reload alongside supply ships instead of returning to port. Presence gaps will close. The bleeding loop will end. But TRAM moves missiles. It does not build them. It takes 18 months to manufacture a single Tomahawk cruise missile. It takes 12 seconds to fire one. The machine that matters most in modern naval warfare is not the radar that finds the target. It is not the missile that strikes it. It is not the VLS cell that launches it, or the hydraulic rail that reloads it. It is the machine on the factory floor, the one that turns raw metal into a guided weapon. And that machine does not answer to admirals, it answers to physics, the physics of metal, heat, and time.